Welcome to the Salty Life Podcast.
We are your hosts, Paul and Sav, entrepreneurs, parents, business owners, and yes, Christians.
Getting salty has a few different meanings in our culture, some good and some not so good.
We are here to help you add some of that good saltiness to your life by giving advice based off of our own experiences
and mistakes,
and providing you with some practical solutions to navigating this crazy world.
Let's get salty.
Okay, welcome back to the Salty Life with Paul and Sav.
Hello.
We were thinking about a topic to talk about today, and Savannah brought up the topic of a DINK, and she was actually surprised that I knew what that was.
Super surprised.
And so, we're going to talk about what is a DINK and should you be one today. And for people that don't know, Savannah, why don't you kind of start us off and explain what a DINK is and the thought behind that?
Okay, so a DINK it's a term for dual income, no kids. Okay, so there's a growing trend of people who are choosing, especially among I think it would be younger millennials and Gen Z, deciding that they're going to get married, or maybe they're not going to get married, but they're going to have a partner or whatever, but they're not going to have kids. So they have combined finances, obviously. So they have two incomes, which is the dual income part. And then they don't have kids, and they are basically going around the internet and gloating about how great their lives are because they can go to brunch and drink all day, and they have all this extra money to travel and do all these things. And I'm not going to lie, when I first saw it, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was comical. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it sounds pretty great to me, honestly.
It would sound great to you.
I think that's what I wanted to be. When we first got married, I just didn't know the name for it back then.
They didn't have a name for it back then.
Yeah, I wanted to invent the movement.
Yeah.
And you shot me down.
I did shoot you down on that one. So we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about why we think that having kids is a blessing and you should have kids, and some of our differences as we've been together. Initially, Paul did not want kids and I did. And it's funny because we talked about all these things before we got married. He doesn't remember talking about these things, but we talked about having kids, and we talked about how it would be better to raise a family in Texas versus California. And a couple of years into our marriage, when I was like, okay, when are we going to have kids? And he's like, we're not having kids. I'm like, whoa, hold up.
So you say we had these conversations before we got married. They must have been on a whole different level for you, because I don't remember agreeing to have kids before we got married.
Yeah. So we used to go on these walks at night in my dad's neighborhood when we were engaged, and we talked about having kids, and we talked about how both of our moms stayed home, and we talked about all sorts of things. And Paul I think he has amnesia because he chooses not to remember, but we did discuss these things. So when he said he didn't want kids, and I was like, whoa, hold up, if I would have known you didn't want kids, I never would have married you. And he's like, wait, what? So it created this huge friction point early on in our marriage. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, for sure. There was many friction points early on in a marriage, but that was definitely one of them.
Yeah. And I was of the mind of, if you don't ever let me have kids and we stay together and you choose me to miss out on that experience in life, I think I remember saying this exactly. I was like, then I never thought I would get divorced, but that would be the only thing. That was it for me. And so the only time in our marriage I ever brought up divorce was that. Do you remember that?
I very clearly remember that. I did not have amnesia when it came to that.
And how did that make you feel?
Well, I felt betrayed, I think, more than anything, because again, I don't remember these conversations where I agreed to have kids before we got married. And so, yeah, we went on lots of walks, but you said that we talked about our moms being stay-at-home moms. Did you want to be a stay-at-home mom? Was that your goal?
We talked about me not wanting to be a stay-at-home mom. I always wanted to have a career or something else to do. And we kind of discussed, and that was actually one that you were kind of very much more well, when the kids are little, someone needs to stay home with them. And I just kind of blew that off oh, we'll deal with that later. Obviously that was not what we did, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a tough topic for us to discuss just because we were so polar opposite on all of it.
Well, and I think I wasn't probably necessarily against having kids. It's just that, things were pretty rough the first 2 or 3 years of our marriage. And then we had finally gotten to like a decent place financially. And, the last big thing that we did before we had a kid was like some friends of ours just randomly invited us to road trip to Las Vegas, and Kansas State was playing in a bowl game in Arizona.
That was fun.
Yeah. And so we were able to pick up and go and didn't have to, check on anybody's schedule or anything like that. We just went, and we were gone for like whatever, 8 or 9 days, and just had a blast. And
we were also finally in a financial position where we could like pay cash for that trip and not stress about it, which was nice.
Yep. And then we had kids and went the other way very
Well,
quickly.
it wasn't just having a kid. Like, we opened the salon and there was a lot that happened that year. Anyways, so something else that's a little bit different about this podcast is neither of us knows what's the other one's going to ask. So normally we kind of like come together, get our questions together, and kind of like do an outline together. Paul wrote down some questions about this topic for me, and I wrote down some questions about this topic for him, and neither of us knows what we're going to ask the other. So if we seem a little hesitant in our answering, that's probably why.
I don't think it's going to be hesitant. I think it's going to be much more genuine, and just there's not going to be much of a filter.
True.
Which is probably better, right?
I don't know. We'll
find out.
So do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a good one for you.
All right.
So you're very much, on the debate of whether you should have kids or not, you're very much pro having kids, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my thing is, one question would be, with everything that's going on in the world today, does it even make sense to have kids? And why or why not?
So I have a kind of a longer answer to that one, because I would say I've shifted back and forth.
Okay.
And I would say if I didn't have a relationship with God, my answer would probably be no.
So you've shifted back and forth. So at one point, were you thinking that you shouldn't bring kids into this world?
So go back 2020, 2021, and I had made the comment to a few people like, yeah, if I didn't have kids already, I probably wouldn't be having kids right now, just because the way that the world was shifting, it like rocked my world. Like, things that I never in a million years thought would happen. And I think a lot of people felt that way. And there was a sense of fear that I had never felt before either. Like the fear of not being able to go to work and make money so that I could provide for my family or do the things that I needed to do or pay for the things that we needed to pay for. That was very, very scary. And that really rocked my faith, and it rocked my whole worldview. So I think what?
You're saying when the government told you that you weren't allowed to go to work, that rocked your view
of everything. Yeah. Are you surprised?
Just being sarcastic.
Yeah. So for me, at that time is kind of whenever I really dug into the Bible and really started like on this deeper faith journey that I've been on for the past few years. And as I read God's word and kind of like learned what he says, and, there's a bunch of scriptures and I can't quote them directly because I'm horrible at that. But, he does say to go forth and multiply, like we are called to have children. And he also says in the Bible, and I can't tell you exactly where, but he talks about how children are a blessing and you were born for such a time as this. So every single soul is born at the exact time that they were supposed to be born, and God has preordained that. So I believe that if you look over the course of history, there were certain people in history that were born for those times because those were the people that were going to be needed for that time. So I believe that our children, even though they're facing unprecedented things as they grow, for the first time in history, I would say there's a huge attack on white males. Would you agree with that?
Are you allowed to say that?
I'm allowed to say that, yes.
Okay.
As a mom of 2 blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boys that are going to grow up to be strong men because of their father and because of the way that we're raising them, like I know that they're going to encounter challenges that other generations prior didn't have to encounter. So I believe that they were born in this time because this is the time that God needed them to be there. And, that's just my perspective. So I'm not off the topic of the question, but I feel like there was another part to that question. Did you ask the whole thing, or did I answer?
Well, it's just like, why should you or should you not have kids with everything going on in the world today?
Well, I think the other part of that is God doesn't give us fear. Satan does, right? So fear does not come from God. And that is in scripture over and over and over again. So when you think of that, if you're not having kids because you're fearful of the world that we're in, then you're missing out on that blessing of motherhood or fatherhood and having a family because of something, a fearful state that you're in. And that's not what God wants you to do.
So, and I guess maybe I would almost say, are you kind of saying that if you decide not to have kids because you're fearful of the world, then are you kind of in a way just giving up then? Because if you're not going to raise kids to kind of carry on your legacy and maybe try to improve the world, and you're just ending your line, right? Then you're kind of just giving up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like our society today gives up on everything. Like we turn to pharmaceutical drugs for every challenge, anything that we don't want to feel. Like if we're grieving, and I'm not saying that there's not a time for those things, but I feel like we are so quick to jump to a quick solution, not to face the challenges of life. And we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to face the challenges head on, and we're supposed to lean on God and our faith and, biblical principles to get through those things. And I feel like even as Christians, most of the time these days, we don't. We go to the world for those answers instead. And I think that this whole DINK thing is a solution to a problem that wasn't really there. Having children is not a problem, it's a blessing. And our society is shifting to where it's like, ooh, that's not good. We don't want to do that.
Well, let me interject, but
it's too hard.
But you're saying that a DINK is a solution to a problem. What is the problem? Or do you want me to define the problem?
Do you want to define the problem?
I will define the problem.
You define the problem and I'll tell you if I want to add anything to it. How's that?
Okay. Well, just tell me that if I'm wrong. But I think the reason this whole DINK thing became about is because, you go back 30 or 40 years, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less, but you had, one income family where you could have a house, you could have health insurance, you could go on vacation, and you could have one partner stay home, right? And then with everything that's gone on, and now we're fighting inflation, and job growth just has not kept up with all that, just all the economic challenges. Now it's just kind of like, I don't want to deal. It's not so much I don't want to deal with the kids, but it's just like the stress of life and the financial burden and all of that, because it is a massive financial burden to have kids too, right? So I think that is the solution, is like, well, we're just going to have two incomes. That way we can live comfortably, have no kids, and so I think it's just a solution to the way our economy and our society has kind of gone in the wrong direction from the 80s, 70s, 60s, when you had the one income families.
Would you add that the feminist movement of the 60s and 70s has caused this?
I would say that as a man, I am not qualified to answer that question. So maybe you need to answer that one.
I mean, I think it definitely, I think the original feminist movement was so that women could have choices. Like they could have their own bank account, they could buy a car, they could do things on their own without feeling like they were subservient to a husband or their dad or whatever. So I don't have a problem with the intent of the original movement. My problem is where it's led us. It's led us to a society where you can't really live on one income unless that person makes a lot of money, or unless you choose to not have a lot of the modern conveniences that we have and you don't go on vacation. And there's a very select few. I know we have friends where the mom stays home and the dad works, or the dad stays home and the mom works, and they make it work. But they are a very small percentage of who can actually afford to do that. We could do it. I just can't seem to walk away from this career that I've built, that I've loved. And I have this awesome schedule now. And I'm in this like very other small majority where I get to do all the mom things and still have my career and kind of have my cake and eat it too. But I also only work part-time hours now. So it's just very different for me. Well, I'm grateful that I have the opportunities to work and have a career and do all those things. But at the same time, I feel like our world has shifted so far to where most people don't have the opportunity. They're forced to. And we've been forced to allow other people to raise our children. And I think a lot of that really was pushed so that the government can make more tax money on people's wages. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I feel like the original intent of the feminist movement is not where it is now. Now it's gone to a whole new place. And I don't really agree with where we're at now on that.
I completely agree. You said you work part-time, but then you got your real estate license, so you don't work part-time anymore.
Yeah, but
It's a joke.
It's I like projects. We discussed this. I like to have projects. And so for me, working is projects. And I feel like we're in a place where we can build something to give to the boys eventually. And that's a whole different topic of conversation. So I want to go back to a question I have for you to kind of go back, because I feel like you have a great perspective on why not to have kids and why you didn't want kids. And this goes pre the world turning into the dumpster fire that it currently is. If you go back to your early 20s, or when we got married, I was 21 and you were 26. And why did you not want to have kids? Like, why were you so opposed to the idea of becoming a dad? Because you used to say, like, I don't want to be a dad. And I'm like, but you would be a great dad. I can see it. You would be awesome. And you're just like, I don't care. I don't want to be a dad. I don't want to do that. So what was your reasoning? What was going through your head in those conversations, I guess, if you can remember, since you don't remember a lot of things?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty simple, honestly. I mean, the first one probably, unfortunately, is selfishness, right? So I brought up that vacation that we went on, and again, it didn't break the bank because we were a double income, no kid family at the time. We paid off our debt. We were finally ahead, and I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to be married. I very much liked being married to you. I was very happy that I was married to you, but I just wanted to, I wanted to have the nicer things in life. I wanted to be able to have the bigger house, and I could see the kids were going to be a huge financial burden on us. So again, that's a selfish reason, right? The other one is probably more fear-based, but like I would say I couldn't see myself being a dad. And you're like, oh, you'd be a great dad. I'm like, how do you know? I mean, I knew that even at 26, I wasn't mature enough to handle having someone else's life that I was responsible for.
Time out, though.
Okay.
We had 3 dogs. And you were such a good dad to the dogs. Like, you cared more about those dogs than like anything in the world. So I know that probably sounds kind of silly, but you're saying like, how would I know? Like, I watched you with our dogs starting as a puppy, and like, I watched how careful you were and how cautious and how you were always thinking of them. Even if we just went to dinner, like you wanted to get home so you could be with them and things. And so like, I saw those characteristics in you. I could see the bigger picture.
Okay. So perfect example. So yes, I was a great doggy dad. But yeah, but the thing is, like, I was always worried about them. And like, you even saw Bruiser at the end of his life. I mean, I was constantly worried about him, trying to make him more comfortable. So I was thinking in my mind, okay, this is a dog. You give me a human, it's like that times 1,000, right? So just the stresses and like the doubts of whether I'll be able to measure up or hold up or do the right thing or all that. I mean, that was a big fear that was kind of driving that for me. So
you mentioned earlier that, or I mentioned earlier that the only time that divorce ever came up in our marriage was when I wanted to have a kid and you didn't. And I was just very much like, if you deprive me of this, then we won't get divorced now. We'll have a life. And then when I'm like 50, I'll hate you so much and resent you so much that we'll never have like joy in our later years, because I'll be so mad that you took that from me. And I'm not saying that this is the way to do this, women. I definitely do not suggest or recommend my method. I was young and mad, and I had just gotten off of birth control, which I had been on for like 15 years, I think. Like, I got on it very, very young. So I was very like hormones crazy and, just all over the place. But I remember you telling me, like, anytime you've ever talked about it before, you said that I put a gun to your head. Mm-hmm. That's metaphorically not real. Like, I didn't really put a gun to his head, but that's how it made you feel. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
On how it made me feel?
And why you chose to go along with it, even though you were very strongly against having kids.
Well, I mean, you metaphorically did put a gun to my head, because you said we're either going to have a kid or I'm divorcing you. So it wasn't like a quick decision, but when you're faced with a decision where it's either, you go right or go left, it's like you have to just decide at some point. There was no middle ground. There was no gray area. At least you seemed very serious about the fact that you were going to divorce me if we didn't have a kid. So at the end of the day, you have to decide. So I guess I chose you.
I'm really glad you did.
So it was
Once again, I do not condone that. I don't condone like holding divorce over your partner's head to get what you want at all. Once again, I was really, really young and not as mature as I am now.
well, and I'll just say too that if you do remember, the end of that conversation was because at that point you had decided that you wanted to open a hair salon. So I said, pick a kid or pick the salon. Listen, I just don't want to do both. I don't want to do both because I think I could kind of see far enough ahead. And I had conversations with a friend of ours who had owned a hair salon. This is like, hey, you don't realize what you're getting yourself into. So that was basically like having a kid, and then the salon was like having triplets or something all at the same
That's a whole
time.
another thing. But anyway, so you decided to go along with it, and then I got pregnant super fast. Like, it's like he had finally just said, yeah, okay, we can have a kid. And then I was like pregnant right away. Which is a blessing. I knew a lot of people. I thought it was going to take forever to get pregnant because most of the people that I know like had really struggled with fertility issues, and it took them forever. And so like I was like, oh, it's probably going to take like 6 or 10 years to get pregnant. So we got to do this now. And then I was pregnant, basically instantly. How do you feel at that moment?
Well, I remember whenever you took the test, and you see in the movies all the time like these big joyful scenes of hugs and jumping up and down. Everyone's so excited, and you called out to me in panic, and
I was terrified.
And I think I just like hung my head and said, "Oh man!"
Like we were at that moment. I was like, "What did I do? Holy cow! This was fast. This is way sooner than I thought it was going to be."
Yeah, and I just remember thinking that we weren't ready. I wasn't ready, like mentally or emotionally or financially for this. And hey, it was the beginning of a really long, hard 6-7 years. Not gonna lie.
So moving into that, so not wanting to have a kid, agreeing to have a kid, and then getting Brooks. And then if you don't know, like we opened the salon 6 weeks after Brooks was born. Way too soon. Don't recommend. So in a sense, I feel like we kind of had twins because.
That's what I was saying. It's more like the salon was like having triplets plus a newborn. Probably. So yeah.
So in a sense, so Paul being someone who never wanted to have kids, he was thrust into doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, I was nursing and I was working. The salon was open 9 to 9, 6 days a week. It was pure chaos. And I'm really grateful. We had some help from my mom and some friends and things like that, but it was just chaotic. And that first summer, Brooks was about 6 months old. And at this time, Paul was a coach and a teacher. And so he was on summer break. So he was with Brooks all day, every day. You want to tell us how that felt?
I'm trying to remember. So long ago.
Have you blocked it out?
Well, I mean, I think God has a sense of humor, right? And so you had this selfish guy that never wanted to have kids. And next thing you know, you've got a 6-month-old that you're with 24/7, right? So, I mean, to say that I think we had an extra strong bond because of that, and I remember you laughing at me because, I mean, first of all, I'm not going to sit at home all day, right? And so, I had a 6-month-old and I just loaded him in the car, go, whatever we had to do. I was just gone, and I think Brooks ended up liking that.
Yeah, I was very impressed. Well, I say impressed at first when I would call like in between clients and check in and stuff, like you'd be like, oh, we're at Target. I'm like, what? You went somewhere? You're like, yeah. Oh, okay. I went to the grocery store. We did this. I'm like, wait, hold on. Cause it was so stressful for me to take Brooks anywhere. Like the anxiety and the stress that I felt to load him up and load all the things that he needed up and go to the store. And he hated being in the car. So every time you strap that kid in a car seat, he cried. Like he hated it. And it took us like 2 years to figure out the sun was in his eyes and he didn't like the sun in his eyes. And then we fixed that. But anyways, so the fact that you just like went, I'm not going to lie, I felt very inadequate a lot. I felt like, okay, I'm the one that wanted the kid and he's way better at this than me so many times. And even now, like you're much more patient with the kids and stuff and you're like their play friend,
I wasn't better. I'm a man, so I'm more efficient.
You're more efficient? Okay.
So we load the bare necessities in a diaper bag and we're gone. That's how we roll. So that was the only It wasn't better, just more efficient.
I do remember you complaining a couple of times that there wasn't a changing table in the men's restroom. So you had to like go out to the car and change him if y'all were somewhere or whatever. And
Yeah. But you know what? We just figure it out when we go. So that's what we did.
so at what point, because you didn't tell me this until years later, but at what point in Brooks being here, because I know that like as a mom, you deliver your child and the amount of love, and even before you deliver your child, you love the child. Like women are just naturally made to unconditionally love things. And I remember like the feeling that I had when he was born, and it was a very traumatic delivery and everything like that. And we were both exhausted, and that's a whole nother story. But I instantly felt like I would give my life for this child. You did not feel connected to him instantly, you've said before. So when did that come? Like, when did you get to the point where you're like, okay, I forgive Savannah for making me do this because it's so awesome and I'm so glad I did it?
I don't know. Has it happened yet?
You have told me that it has. And I will also add that you're the reason we have Wyatt. I was good. I mean, we had talked about having more kids, but Brooks was 4. And I was kind of like, I'm good. Like, you gave me a child. I'm happy I got to be a mom. If you don't want any more, like, that's cool. And you were like, nah, we should do it again.
Okay, but it was more of a, what do I say? It was more like a logical decision, not an emotional decision. It's like we're at the point in our lives where if we're going to have another one, we probably have to do it now or we're not going to be able to. And so, again, it wasn't like man, I just can't wait to have another kid. This was so awesome to have a baby that poops everywhere and cries all the time and doesn't sleep. That was so much fun. That wasn't that. It was just like, hey, we're, recognizing where you're at in your life.
So we're already in this mess. We might as well add to it.
Well, no, the ironic thing was that we had just gotten Brooks out of like diapers and pull-ups and everything.
He was feeding himself.
Yeah. So if I remember right, we had like 2 months with no diapers and then we started over again. So, but again, that was more of a logical decision. But like, when did I bond with Brooks? I mean,
no, when did you get to that point where you're like, I'm really like, I love him so much. I'm so glad he's here. Because I know that was not instant for you when he was crying all night and not sleeping. And I was mad. And let me also add, during my pregnancy with Brooks, Paul was not nice to me. He was like anytime I had really bad morning sickness or I was tired, he's like, you wanted it. This is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. Deal with it. Like, he had zero empathy for me at all. It was not one of those like happy, loving situations in that time.
But there's also plenty of other things that went along with that. Like, you put a gun to my head. You decided you're going to do natural childbirth. And so then we had to do the natural childbirthing classes that were over an hour away. And so, yeah, there was lots of late night birthing classes, long ways away. So
weren't you glad we did that in the end though? Because I will say this, he was a jerk my entire pregnancy. The day that I delivered, we bonded so much. He was on my side. I remember my mom was in the room and she just looked at me and I was all back labor, and it was a really difficult, delivery, and my contractions were bad. It was just bad. And the nurses were pressuring me to have drugs and the doctors were pressuring me, and it was just a big old mess. But anyway, I remember my mom, she was in the room and she's like, no one's going to think anything less of you if you have drugs. And Paul's like, Beth, get out right now. And he just looked at me. He's like, you don't want drugs. You will be so mad at yourself if you have drugs. And he was right. And so like, he may have been kind of a jerk the whole time I was pregnant, but when it came down to it, he was there and he did what he needed to do. And without him, I couldn't have gotten through that delivery.
I was your jerk at that point.
Yes, he was mine. And we bonded through that whole thing. Like, we did.
Mm-hmm. We did. Really glad you had drugs with Wyatt.
Well, that was a different situation. So, and I will also add, the pregnancy with Wyatt, I kind of got to experience that excitement when I found out I was pregnant. And like, that pregnancy was really hard because I almost died a couple times. But Paul was excited to do it again. Like, he knew what to expect. So he was excited, and Brooks was excited, and it was fun. Like, picking a name wasn't like a battle to the death. It was like exciting to pick a name and to have different ideas and things.
And I would say this too, just a side note, but yeah, I was excited because I knew what to expect. That's because I had never been around little kids in my life. I was the youngest. I didn't have cousins that were anywhere close. I'd had no experience with any of this baby stuff or little kid stuff at all. Zero. And so I had no idea what to expect. So that was probably a lot of my hesitation. Your childhood was very, very different. So you can like, oh yeah, I got this. I've seen it a million times. So,
Yeah, I think you have one cousin and I have like 20 something.
I have 3 cousins, but
3. Okay.
yeah, exactly. You didn't know that. So
Whoops. Oh wait, no. I met one of them at our wedding.
yeah, no, yeah.
I forget about that side.
Again,
Okay.
they were all older than me. So
Yeah. So
anyway.
he was the actual baby and I was on the older side of my mom's family. I was the baby of my dad's family though, so I get that.
Yeah.
So, but you still haven't answered my question. At what point were you like, yeah, I'm really glad that we did this. I'm glad that I'm a parent.
I mean, it's easier to say I'm really glad that I'm a parent. I mean, I bonded with them. It was still like, this is so hard, but I don't know. I mean, it probably took longer for me. I mean, he was probably, like 6 months or so, or in that range. But like when they can look at you and like you see in their eyes that they recognize you and then their face lights up. So, I mean, you can't put a price on that. That's when the bonding starts. So whenever it is 4, 5, 6 months, somewhere in that range, they recognize you. And
When
you know
Brooks
it.
was 3, I remember you saying, this is pretty cool. I was like, what? And you're like, he's like a person. He's finally like a person. I can talk to him. We can have conversations. He's like, this is pretty cool. I like this part. I don't like the baby part, but I like this part. Mm-hmm. And even with Wyatt, like, I feel like you had that moment when I think you had it earlier with Wyatt because Wyatt talked a little sooner and could communicate a little bit more. But I remember you.
Well, Wyatt was also just like so happy-go-lucky almost from the day he was born. It was just like a completely different experience. He slept through the night. He was just always happy to see you, always just happy to hang out with the family. It was very different than Brooke. So it probably happened a little bit. And again, we were much more relaxed. So I think he was much more relaxed.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. If you're relaxed with your kid, they're going to take on the energy that you have. So I think that's why if you ever read about birth orders, excuse me, the birth order, like the oldest is usually a little bit more high strung and like anxious. And then the youngest, it's usually more chill and laid back. I think it's because when you have your first kid, you're anxious. You don't know what to do. You're figuring it out. There is no manual to have a child. I think that was actually one of the funniest things too, is like when we got ready to leave the hospital with Brooks, Paul's just like, that's it? Like, we just get to leave now? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, they don't want to like give us, there's no test or anything. Like you just get to leave.
Well, but also like at the hospital, there's all these things you have to go through and all these protocols, all this paperwork, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, are you ever going to get to leave? And then all of a sudden they just like put him in the car, you're gone. And like, oh, they trust me with my own. I didn't trust myself with that little bitty infant. That's probably what it was.
Yeah. It was a cool experience though. So what's your next question for me?
So I guess, does the DINK lifestyle sound appealing to you at all?
Oh, absolutely. You want to know what's funny is I used to think that people that were divorced, that both had their own kids and then got divorced and then had their schedule set up to where they had all their kids at the same time and then they had like a week off. I used to think that was so cool. I'm like, that would be the only benefit of getting divorced and getting remarried is like having a break from your kids. But we're at a point in our like parental life where, and I think we've set good boundaries of making sure that we have our time away from the kids, but now we miss them. So like last summer, I basically got a glimpse into that for 2 weeks. We sent our kids to California to visit my dad. And after about a week, I was like, yeah, this sucks. Like I missed them so much and I was so bored. My house was so quiet, like eerily quiet, like creepy quiet. And I think I drove you insane because I was just like, what are you doing? What's going on? Because once again, I have a schedule now to where I do have that time freedom I do get to do stuff for myself. I have a little bit of that. I'm not with them 24/7. So I think it sounds appealing for like a couple days. So like our weekends where we get away and we're really good about getting away, or when we go on our like little trips alone are fun. But at the same time, I'm excited to get home and see them. And I miss them. They're pretty cool. Their thoughts and the conversations we have, like I wouldn't give that up for anything. I wouldn't give that up for like no amount of freedom or money or brunches or any of that.
So would you say that having kids, it's like the purpose, right? It kind of gives you, like, that's why you go to work. That's why you do all the things.
Well,
like,
I think, and this is just, I know a lot of people who didn't have kids that are older. And when I talk to a lot of them, I think there's a sense of like longing for purpose or missing out. Cause you get to a point where you can do all the things you want to do, right? You've traveled, you've been able to do all these experiences and everything like that. But like at the end of your life, like what is that? If you don't have people, then what is it? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying you should have kids so that you have someone there at the end of your life, but like the amount of joy that the love and the relationships that you have with your children bring you. And even like looking at my grandpa, he and my grandma both, they love to see their great grandkids. Like it just, the amount of joy. Yeah, I think it gives you a sense of purpose. And I think it gives you a glimpse into, into why God calls us to have kids. I think he calls us to have kids so that we can experience that love and that we can understand how he loves us. You know, I don't think you truly understand the magnitude of God's love for us until you have a kid and you would literally throw yourself in front of a bullet or a train or anything to protect them and keep them safe because you love them so much.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, no, I can see that. I would say that definitely helped my relationship with God is having a kid, because you're like, how could God forgive me for this, or how could God forgive me for that? But at the same time, you would probably pretty much forgive your kid for just about anything, right? And if God loves us more than we could love our kids, even, I guess it kind of helps put that in perspective, helps you understand that concept a little bit better.
I think it helps you understand the concept that God is love. Like, love isn't something that you can see or like touch or anything like that. So it's kind of hard to measure that. And once again, women, we unconditionally love. Like, I unconditionally love you. And I know that that's a hard thing for you to grasp, but you feel that and understand that better because we have kids now and you know what that feels like, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I think that having kids, would you say it has brought us closer in our marriage?
Well, yeah. I mean, now that we have the kids, yeah, it absolutely brings us closer together. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, whatever problems you have to work through in your marriage, and having kids, it's, I don't want to call them a problem, but it's a set of issues that you have to solve and figure out how you're going to do this and how you're going to do that. So you either work those things out together or you don't. You either grow closer together or you don't. So whether it was having the salon or which house you're going to live in, or if you're going to have kids or not, how you're going to raise your kids, at every point you have a choice to either grow closer together and work through those problems together, or go the other way. So I think fortunately we've pretty much agreed. We've talked things through and agreed, and we've moved forward together. So yeah,
we haven't agreed on everything.
The debates are ongoing on certain things, but that's part of it. But we will make a decision together on those things. We will eventually make a decision and agree and move forward together. So eventually.
So why would you, like, if you had to like convince someone that having a kid was the better option than being a dink, how would you sell that to them? Like, how would you convince them?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think it's kind of what you said. You have to look forward to the end of your life. There's a couple things. You have to look forward to the end of your life, where you're going to be, but also you have to start asking those really, really big, difficult questions that we like to avoid a lot of times, which is like, why are we here? What is our purpose? And like you said, the Bible says we're supposed to go forth and multiply, right? I mean, gosh, it's, now that I have kids, I couldn't imagine not having them, because, and I think it makes you a better person overall, because you start, I think the definition of being a good person is doing things for other people that don't necessarily directly benefit you. And I think having kids, you start doing all of these things for someone else. You become a servant. It makes you humble. It makes you really think about the things that are coming out of your mouth, and makes you think about your actions and what you're doing. Right. So I think all that together, having kids, it should make you a much better person in the end, which should lead to a better life, right?
You would think. So you mentioned that, God calls us to have kids and go forth and multiply. Why do you think we are encouraged in a biblical stance? Why do you think God wants us to have kids? Like, why do you think that that's something that as a Christian you're supposed to do?
Well, I think a lot of that's what I just said, but I mean, really, like you said earlier, it's how can you understand God until you have a child of your own? Like, we're all children of God. How can God love us when we do the things that we do? And if a lot of us, we have the same sins we repeat over and over again, right? But God's always willing to forgive us, always willing to take us back. I'm sure we all know someone who was a kid or has a kid that is always doing crazy stuff, and like, how can they just keep loving that kid, or just maybe refusing to discipline that kid or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not good that they aren't disciplined, but the reason they don't discipline the kid is because they love them so much, right? And they don't want to hurt them or whatever. And so again, that's an imperfect love. God's love is perfect, right? So, but that's kind of what I think on that.
So how has being a parent changed you for the better?
Well, it's kind of what I said. It made me, the appeal of the DINK lifestyle is you get to do whatever you want to do, right? Whenever you want to do it. It's all about you. It's you. But at the end of the day, that's going to make you not, it's going to make you be very unfulfilled, right? I think you're going to feel very hollow. I think you're going to feel very hollow inside. So, what was the question? You distracted me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I choked. It was how being a parent has changed you for the good.
Oh, yeah. So being a parent, I mean, again, I want to be good at whatever I do. So, I can't be a good parent if you're focused on yourself. You have to focus on someone else. And you have to start really thinking about how your actions are affecting that person. And the scary thing is, and it's terrifying to me, that your kids are they're always watching you, and they pick up your, whatever you do. There's a video of Brooks, and he was like 1 year old, and he's in the back seat, and he's like shaking his finger and yelling at other cars in gibberish as they go by. And we're like, wow, where did he get that? That wasn't from me. That was from Savannah. But the kid's less than a year old.
A little road rage.
The kid's less than a year old, and he's got road rage, right? So, it really just makes you start to really evaluate your life, and why am I doing this, and where am I going to be in 5 years? And the thought that's been with me a lot lately is, what am I? Now I can't talk. What are my kids going to think of me whenever they're 20 or 30? And like, if I'm not where I'm supposed to be when I'm 50 or 60, like, how does that reflect on me? What are my kids going to think of me? I mean, that's pretty heavy stuff, So if you need some motivation to get your butt out of bed in the morning and do the things that you need to do,
have a kid.
Yeah. And then think about, what is this kid going to think of me? Are they even going to want to have a relationship with me when they're older? Are they going to be embarrassed of me? Those are some pretty good driving, motivating factors right there.
I've had some criticism from people that are close to me because I'm so hard on the kids, and I don't let them get away with a lot. I don't let a lot of stuff slide. I can be a little harsh. I probably lean more toward the authoritative parent, I guess you'd say. But I think that I've always said I wanted to like my kids when they grew up. Like, I wanted them to be these people that I want to be best friends with, and I want them to want to be best friends with me. And if I'm their friend all the time now, then I can't discipline them and, help them curate who they are. The really interesting thing, and I did not realize this until probably a few years ago, your kids, like you said, they're always watching you and emulating you, and, like Brooks yelling at the cars and my road rage and stuff like that. I really feel like God uses your children to help change you and make you better because you see yourself in them. Like you see them do things and you're like, whoa, that's something about me I don't like. And they have it. And I didn't intentionally do that. And so you start to be more intentional about your actions and who you are. And one of the best things I think that we've done as parents with the kids is talk to them about stuff. Like I told Brooks, especially with him and Wyatt being 4.5 years apart, I remember I've told him many times, like, hey, because he'll be like, oh, you didn't let me do that, or that's not fair. And I'm like, listen, kid, life isn't fair. And I know that a lot of people hate hearing that, but it's just reality. It's not fair. But I'm a better parent now because I have 5 years of experience. Like every age that Wyatt's at, mommy and daddy are going to be better because we have 5 more years of experience. Just like, it's like we're training. And I always tell them, I'm like, listen, you're going to be like 20 and you're going to be mad at us about something that we did as parents, but you're going to get the opportunity as a parent to do better. And that's the goal, is like that each generation gets better, right? And I don't feel like my generation of parents, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't feel like they were focused on what they were creating. They were just in like this survival of like just going through the motions. Whereas I feel like our generation is much more in tune with having conversations and talking about things. But in doing that, we're learning to communicate better, and we're raising this generation of kids that are going to be able to communicate a lot better and have better, more insightful thoughts about things and recognize, like, Brooks one day he's like, yeah, his friend was upset or whatever. And he's like, yeah, I asked him. And I was just like, you know what? I think you're just having a bad day. It's okay. We all have bad days. It's no big deal. I wouldn't have had the foresight to say that whenever I was 10, So I think that a lot of people are afraid. My point to this whole thing is I think a lot of people are afraid to have kids because they're afraid to create another human being that's going to have the problems that they have because maybe they have depression or anxiety or things like that. And you get the opportunity when you have children to leave the world in a better place by the people that you raise and bring up, and the beliefs and the thoughts and the principles and the things that you instill in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of things that, as the kids are getting older, it's getting more and more challenging, but it's also more and more exciting. There's more things that, to teach them. There's things that we had to figure out the hard way that we can teach them now. And then, I'm always talking about managing money and all that kind of stuff, but, things that we just didn't know, and now our kids, like Brooks at the age of 10, he knows, more than I did about managing money at the age of 25 or 30 probably, but it's all through our mistakes and what we were able to share with them. So yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I have this tickle in my throat that won't go away.
Well, do you want me to hit you another question?
Sure. You haven't hit me with very many. I just was kind of rolling with it.
That's all right. This is a good one. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
All right. So what's your advice for younger couples? Should you have kids now, or should you wait a little bit to have kids?
Oh, that's tough. I actually just had a conversation with someone kind of off the cuff maybe a few weeks ago. And we were talking, and it was a younger couple, and she said something about how like, oh, it just seems nice because you guys are established before you had kids and financially okay. And I just kind of looked at her and laughed because I was like, wait, what? Like, I think that people might look at us and think that, we have it all together and we had it all together when we had kids, just because the perception outside or on social media or whatever. But the reality is, like, I don't think you're ever really ready. Like, there's nothing that can prepare you. Even if you have all the money in the world, like, you're still not going to be prepared. There's no amount of preparation you can do to have children. I think that, there's a saying that like money is a multiplier. I think that becoming a parent is a multiplier. So the idea that money is a multiplier is like, if you're good and you have good intentions and good beliefs and, want to make the world a better place, then you have more money, you're able to do more good. I think that's the same thing applies. If you have good intentions and you become a parent and you actually put that child's needs ahead of your own. Just like if in a marriage you put your spouse's needs ahead of your own, then you're going to be fine. Like you're going to do well and it's going to bring out the good in you, right? I feel like both you and I have become better people because we had children and we love them and we want to be better for them. Like I'm really working on not yelling. I was talking to kids about generational curses, right? Because I'm a yeller. And anytime I ask them like, hey, what does mommy do that you really don't like that I can work on every single time? I don't like it when you yell at me. And I'm like, oh, then why do you make me yell at you? Right? Because they just don't listen. Sometimes I have to like get louder to get them to listen. And so I've been working on that a lot and talking to them. It's like, realizing that there's this thing in me that I don't like, or these characteristics about myself that I don't like, and actively working to change them. It's only because of them. It's because I love them. And I don't want them to pass on that trait to their children. You know, like I don't want them to have that in their life moving forward, and being able to talk to them and tell them that, like, I don't think I ever would have worked on that. I would have just had the perspective. And I think I told you this even prior to us having kids, like, well, that's just who I am. Deal with it. Like, you knew I was a yeller when we got married, you know, that's just who I am. And I no longer have that perception. It's like, you can grow and change at any point, at any age, if you want to, and if you're willing to do the work to. So having kids multiplies the good and it exposes the bad.
Well, the question wasn't whether you should have kids or not.
What was the question?
Should you have kids earlier or should you wait to have kids? That was the question.
Okay. So I think I used to would have said you should wait. And now my answer is the sooner you have them, the sooner you value who they are, and the sooner you can start changing into a better person. So that's my answer. I don't think that waiting benefits you any advantage at all because you're going to figure it out. That is the one thing I would say at this point in my life, to just go forth and figure it out. And I think that if you lean on God and you look for wisdom in his word and, you know, you look for that support system, I think that if we would have had the friends that we have now back when we had our kids, it would have been a lot easier. Do you agree?
Well, the one thing that you can say that makes me break out in hives is we'll just figure it out. Because that's led to so many very, very hard things that we had to work our way through.
I agree, but I don't think that you can prepare. Do you think you can prepare for having kids?
I think to a certain extent. Now, can you ever prepare what it's like to have the doctor hand you an infant that you have to take care of, and like, you know, all the feelings that you get of like, how am I going to keep this thing alive and, you know, not completely screw them up? Like, no, you can't prepare for that, but
you're thinking you're going to come at this from a financial perspective, right?
Yeah, 100% I am.
Okay,
so
I don't disagree with that. But I think that you can get so busy preparing and saving. And I'm glad we had saved when we had Brooks, because as a hairstylist, I didn't have maternity leave. I wasn't going to get paid. So we saved money. We had so much put back so that I could take a certain amount of time off. Like, I'm not saying that that's bad.
Okay. Well, we didn't save very much. You couldn't take very much time off.
No, and I do regret not being able to take more time off.
Yeah, you could take a couple of weeks off, but yeah, I think for me, the answer is somewhere in the middle. Like, yeah, you can't wait forever, but there's an easy way and a hard way to do everything. So I think you just need to come up with an agreement of like, all right, well, how much do we need to save up so that we are somewhat comfortable so I can take a little bit of time off? Because we definitely did not do that. And it was very, very, very difficult. And it didn't have to be that difficult.
Well, I would also say too that like, so Paul's parents are my grandparents' age. My parents are much younger. My parents had me when they were 20. Your dad was what, 40 when you were born? Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, I am the oldest and he is the youngest in his family. But like, I love that my parents can still do all these things with our kids. You know what I mean? Like, I love that they could do all this stuff with me. Don't get me wrong. My parents made a lot of mistakes like all parents do, but I've always liked that. So I would say, I think it's really weird. All these people that are having kids in their 40s and 50s and just getting started now. Cause I feel like at that point you're tired. Like you don't have it in you to like really like put all in what you need to into your kids. And then you're going to die by the time their life's really getting fun. You know what I mean? By the time they're having grandkids and all that stuff. Yeah. So to me, that just seems, I wouldn't wait 20 years to have kids because you're trying to get your finances in order, right? Like that just seems.
Well, but I think on the flip side of that is if you really do put your finances as a priority, and let's say you're financially free, where you don't even have to work anymore at the age of 40 and then you have a kid, then you can spend all your time raising your kid, right?
Yeah. So on this, I would ask you this. Do you think that, oh my gosh, it just flew out of my head, but it was really good. Hold on 1 second. Would you say that you're talking about having kids, like waiting to have kids? Would you wait to get married, or do you think that getting married young is just fine?
Well, that's a trick question.
Why is it a trick question?
Well, because I mean, you don't know when you're going to meet the person that you should marry. So if you meet them when you're younger and you're 100% sure that's the person that you should marry, then there's nothing wrong with getting married early. But then there's, you can kind of somewhat decide when you're going to have kids.
I
And so you have more control of
disagree.
that.
Because we met really young, or I was really young. We met when I was 19.
Yeah, I didn't make you wait to get married.
You didn't, but there is, there was a statistic, and I have to throw this out there, of men. And it said that men will marry the woman that they're with when they decide they're ready to get married, whereas women will marry the person that they want to marry, versus like a man might not be ready, and then all of a sudden whoever they're with at the moment that they're ready, that's just who they decide to marry. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think it's hard to quantify that. I'm sure it's true in some cases. I mean, I think at a certain point, a man starts looking at, okay, what do I want in a wife? And so if you start dating someone that checks most of the boxes, you probably...
So I checked all your boxes.
Most of them.
Okay, you're going to have to tell me later which ones I didn't check, because now I'm curious.
Yeah. So that a man becomes more open to that conversation, whereas when they're younger, they're probably really not that open to the conversation for the most part.
So it's a trick question. So you say that you couldn't decide if you should wait or not wait to get married, but you can on kids. You should wait until you're financially ready. That's your answers?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have a little bit less control over when you meet your spouse, right? I mean, but then once you're married, then you kind of get to decide, when do we want to have kids? At least. Yeah, kind of. So, yeah, I think you have a little more control over that.
What's your next question for me?
So this is kind of more of a general question, but so I follow Elon Musk quite a bit, and he's always talking about declining birth rates. So have you heard about this whole debate about how, we hear how like the world's being overpopulated, and, because of that, climate change is going to kill us all and all this other stuff. And then you have some other people who seem to be extremely intelligent, like Elon Musk, that are arguing that actually the biggest threat to modern society, especially in the West, is declining birth rates. Like Japan in particular, like they have like 2 people dying for every one being born. So if something doesn't change in the next 20 or 30 years, they're going to have serious problems in their country. And the US is on a similar track.
Well, isn't that kind of like what happened with China? Because they had like the one child thing, and now, well, let's not even talk about like the women versus men, but didn't they take that away now because they need more people?
I believe so.
Now you can have like as many kids as you want. It doesn't matter if they're girls or boys.
I don't want to speak on that. I think the one child policy is now gone. I think it might be a 2-child policy, but I would have to look that up.
But didn't that cause a problem?
Did it cause a problem?
Or hasn't it caused a problem?
In China?
Yeah.
That's what kind of problem?
Well, I thought one of the problems is that there's not enough people replacing the people that are already there. So like the old people are dying, and there's not enough young people because they killed.
Well, I think that's why they relaxed the policy to have more kids.
But then also you have like, I think there's like 4 men for every woman. And so the men there they can't get wives because there's not enough women. Because so many people chose to get rid of the girls, and because they wanted a boy to carry on the name.
I don't know. Possibly.
You haven't looked into this?
Not in China. No, I was just more talking about we always hear about how the world's overpopulated and all the issues that it's going to cause, and it's going to cause our demise, when actually we're not replacing the people that are passing away. And like in America, we talk about, is Social Security even going to be around anymore, because we have all of these people that are aging into Social Security, and fewer and fewer people being born that, ultimately need to work and pay into the system or it's going to collapse, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can see that perspective, but also I read something not too long ago and it's like, I think it's like 78% of the US is just like land and people don't live on it still. It's just that so many people live in like really small areas, like the big cities.
Yeah.
So we still have plenty of room to have people. Like there's plenty of land and plenty of room for people to live. So I don't know why I don't buy into the overpopulation, just like I don't buy into cows causing global warming with their farts. Like I think that's complete crap. Personally, no pun intended.
My point of this question is like having kids is probably a good thing. It's not having kids is probably a bad thing because we're actually running out of young people, right? So we would be better off to have kids. That's where I was going with this.
No, absolutely. Like I definitely feel like if you're going to pick a way to go, there's way more benefits to becoming a parent and having a kid or kids or multiple kids than not.
Well, and you're actually helping the world and society and your country by having kids too, right?
Well, I mean, it depends on what your perspective is on the world, but yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
As Christians, I think we definitely need to be having lots of kids. And if we could, we would have like 10 more.
Now? Because you said Wyatt was my idea.
Wyatt
so
was
now
your
you
idea.
Want 10 more? Okay.
Well, our life has changed and I've changed a lot since we've had Wyatt and Brooks. And I would love to have like 15 kids. Maybe not 15, but a lot. So do you have any more questions for me? I think you've answered all of mine.
No, that was really it. We just
Did we hit all the questions?
Yeah, I think so. Just the perspective on the DINK lifestyle, and I'm not gonna lie, it does sound pretty great, but I guess if you have your kids somewhat younger than you raise your kids, then you get to be a DINK.
You literally took the words out of my mouth.
Oh,
I was just
okay.
gonna say that. Like have them younger. That's another reason to say have them younger. Have your kids younger, get established, and then you can enjoy life when they go off to school or they become adults, and you can be there to help them and encourage them and all that.
Okay, so you would say you're definitely pro having kids then?
1,000%. I think everyone should have lots of babies.
Okay.
But I also think that as a society, we need to make having kids more appealing and more. I feel like there's a lot of places now where like they almost look down on you if you bring your kids to a place,
I have not experienced that, I guess.
Oh, you haven't? That's a whole nother thing on social media. People talking about don't bring your kid to this place and don't bring them to this restaurant and don't do this. You haven't seen all that?
I have not, I guess.
Yeah. Other societies, other cultures, they're more open to like children just being part of life. Like it's just expected that kids are welcome. Like weddings these days, people don't want you to bring your kids to at all because the kids could disturb the wedding. Like growing up, all the kids went to all the weddings. Like you didn't expect people to get a sitter, things like that. I feel like our society, our culture needs to change to be more open and more accommodating for people with kids, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
All right. Well, if you have any insight on this, we'd love to hear your feedback. We hope that you enjoyed this. Do you have anything you want to add, Paul?
Not right now.
No. All right.
Said it all.
Well, until next time, stay salty.
Thanks for listening to the Salty Life podcast. We appreciate you choosing to spend some time with us.
If you like what you've heard today, please like and share on your favorite social media.
And don't forget to click the subscribe button to hear new episodes of the Salty Life podcast.
Until next time, stay salty.